Part 5. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishida. Chapter 41. Are you leaving? After the skeleton disappeared for a while, Kusei Sword withdrew his slanted eyes. He is indeed a brainless guy. If you cooperate with me, they can figure it out. The low-level undead seek cooperation with Gongxing Sword, so they naturally have their own goals. In this war game, the spawn point of the undead is not very good. Because the jackals are blocked by mountains and natural barriers, they don't have to worry about the threats from humans and elves. Therefore, the jackals can completely deploy all the fighting power of the lords to fight against the undead. But the undead tribe is different. Once caught in a protracted battle with the gnolls, the humans and elves would get involved again. The undead are likely to be the first race to be eliminated from this war game. Although cooperation with the Gongxing Sword is the last resort, according to the current influence of the Gongxing Sword within the human race, they have no choice. What's more, the benefits that the Gongxing Sword can bring to the undead tribe are far more than this. I saw Gongxing John waving to the corner aside, and a pile of dead bones suddenly stood up on the spot. Is it possible to recruit the undead people? Gongxing Jian said silently. This is the type of territory he drew in this game. Territory type, Royal Kyushu. It comes with 2 special effects. Juzhu Lintung, whenever you reach cooperation with a foreign lord, or vassal a foreign lord, you will unlock the other party's subjects and warrior recruitment options. The maximum number of races is 9. Your Majesty Yudeo, you can study the other party's racial technology and share it with the other party. Gongxing Sword itself is very satisfied with this type of territory. Even the undead tribe seeks cooperation with Gongxing Sword, and they also have the credit for Yujuzhu. The Gongxing Sword can recruit the people of the undead clan, and at the same time research the technology of the undead clan and share it with collaborators. Who doesn't know that humankind's scientific and technological research speed is top-notch, and the technology of the undead in ancient times was quite scarce? With the help of the Gongxing Sword, by the end of this game, the undead may be able to complete 80% or even 100% of their own technology tree. Of course, these cooperations will not be carried out in detail until the undead tribe gets rid of Gaoqiang. Shasha lay down next to Gaoqiang and stuffed a piece of barbecue into her mouth with enjoyment. As expected, barbecue is the most delicious. Lord, don't you want to take a bite? No, no, no. Gaoqiang waved his hand. Ever since his contribution surpassed that of Kusei Sword and became the first in the war contribution list, Kusei Sword seemed to have gone completely silent. These days, the discussions about Zhaoqiang on the forum have gradually disappeared, and it seems that it has become the only stubbornness left by Gongxing Sword. When Gongxing Jian didn't cause trouble, Gaoqiang fell into boredom. He stretched out his hand and rubbed Shasha's hair. Listening to Shasha's hee-hee sound, Gaoqiang also lay down on the long table in the Lord's Hall. He finally understood why some people seemed so happy when 30,000 giant wolves were besieging the city. In this ancient era with few entertainment activities, a life without worries about food, clothing, and security is really quite boring. After all, the remnant shadow of the ancestors is there, and it is destined that the people in the Wall of Sighs do not have to worry about food and drink, nor do they need to move around because of safety issues. No, I can't be so slack. Gaoqiang sat up straight and patted his face. Some people have tried their best to survive, so what does it look like to be so lazy? Now, why not encourage Gongxing Sword? Gaoqiang suddenly came up with this idea unintentionally. If you stimulate the Gongxing Sword a little, maybe the other party will have the motivation to continue to fight against you. Just when Gaoqiang was about to implement his plan, an unexpected chat box lit up in his friends list. Saha, which route do you think we should choose? With the next message from Saha, Gaoqiang instantly became more energetic. The message from Saha is, the path of the evil star? You must know that after Gongxing's sword confirmed its strategy, the undead and the elves also quickly confirmed their strategy, which was broadcast by the entire wargame server. The undead have chosen the final strategy, the power of life. The elves have chosen the final strategy, the power of the forest. At that time, Gao Qiang did not hear the final strategy chosen by the jackal, and thought he was too lazy and missed it. Unexpectedly, this week is almost over, and the jackal really hasn't chosen his final strategy. What's interesting is that the evil star of the jackal is actually Saha, and he is still asking for his opinion. It is different from the Gongxing sword. The information sent by Saha was quite detailed. Like the Terrans, the Gnolls have 3 ultimate strategies. Power of the Ancients: deploy the miracle building Great Totem Pole construction plan. The Great Totem Pole will provide each Jackal Lord with a random architectural design of a strange object. The Power of Madness: deploy the main battle unit Giant Tank construction plan. The Giant Tank is 50 meters high and requires 3,000 Jackals as a power source. It can level all obstacles in front of the path. Power of the Wilderness: deploy the miracle building altar construction plan. During the sacrifice at the altar, all jackals acting alone will double in size. So strong. What the 3 final strategies can offer are all quite terrifying. After seeing the detailed information of the 3 strategies of the evil star buff, Gao Qiang finally understood why the whole tribe had to work together to launch the so-called final strategy. From here, Gao Qiang saw the possibility of threatening the wall of size. Executing the final strategy may be very resource-intensive, but it is definitely worth it. So you came to me to determine the final strategy of the Gnolls. Gao Qiang asked Saha in confusion, "Aren't you afraid that I will choose the strategy that is most unsuitable for the Gnolls?" "These are your freedom, you can do whatever you want," Saha said respectfully. "It's better to say that the Gnolls have no intention of winning this game." Gao Qiang scratched his chin, and Saha's attitude really pierced his heart. In this way, letting himself decide the final strategy of the Gnoll tribe is more like a letter of surrender sent by Saha. "Then choose the ancient power," Gao Qiang mentioned tentatively. "The ancient power is currently the final strategy that seems to pose the least threat to the wall of size." "Okay." Saha did not hesitate. The next moment, all notifications sounded. The jackals have chosen the final strategy, ancient power. Gao Qiang narrowed his eyes. I have to say that Saha's unhesitating attitude is really pleasant. "Tell me, you should have more than one thing to ask me." "Haha, I can't hide it from you." A message soon came in Saha's chat box. "The jackals are preparing to launch a full-scale attack on the undead. Are you interested in earning some contribution points?" The image of Gao Qiang carrying the Tyrannosaurus knight like a god that day is still reflected in Saha's mind. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shi De Di. Chapter 42. Gao Qiang narrowed his eyes. Saha dared to say this, he must have received the support of most of the lords among the jackals, just like Gongxing Jian among the human race. And the decision he made, in Gao Qiang's opinion, was quite wise. At this stage, the materials of each race are heavily invested in the deployment of the final strategy, and the territory cannot have much development. Right now is the stage when the combat effectiveness of each race is the weakest. If most of the jackals directly give up the final strategy and invest resources in territory development and warrior recruitment, maybe the undead race can be eliminated from this war before the final strategy of the undead race is completed. However, although Saha has shown his sincerity, he came to find the wrong person. Gao Qiang shook his head. It was different from the previous order to Zhu to lead people to capture the Lord outside the wall. After all, it was at the doorstep of his own home. How could he allow others to snore beside his bed? Besides, it didn't take much effort to walk 2 steps at the doorstep. The area where the undead lord is located is very far away from the wall of size. Before they angered the people in the wall of size, According to Gao Qiang's understanding of everyone, he didn't bother to pay attention to those so-called skeletons. That's right, it's not impossible to ask Gao Qiang to send troops. But Gao Qiang must be given a reason that the other party has offended him. At this moment, Gao Qiang suddenly noticed an old back in front of him walking past. Grandma Zuzu? Seeing Zuzu walking towards the wall with a very clear goal, Gao Qiang raised his eyebrows and always felt that something was going to happen next. The last time Zuzu came out, it was when Gao Qiang and others were not there, and people killed Ji Lenjiao and others who might threaten the territory. Now Zuzu came out again. Why? Could it be that in Zuzu's eyes, there are people who can threaten them in the future and appear around? Thinking of this, Gao Qiang temporarily closed the chat window with Saha. He called Juluo and Chasha, and chased after Zuzu together. Gao Qiang didn't stop until he reached the flood control wall. He found that Zuzu was not the only one who came to the protective wall. Even Lei Heshuo and Hayukin also appeared here and stood on both sides of Zuzu. Huh. Hayukin glanced back and waved to Gao Qiang and others. You are here too? What's going on? Gao Qiang asked while climbing to the top of the flood control wall and looking out. Then he saw the grass in the distance gradually withering. The withering was getting closer and closer to the wall of size. If it continued like this, it would probably spread under the wall in less than an hour. Shasha just looked at it casually, and after realizing that she couldn't eat it, she looked uninterested. On the contrary, Juluo showed a thoughtful look. It's an interesting plan. Have you understood this change? Gao Qiang looked at Juluo. He was used to the image of this waiter who knew everything. Even the Lord knows the way to Juluo so clearly, let alone the changes outside the wall at present. You know it almost. Juluo nodded, then stretched out a finger and pointed to the outside world. Look at the land in the distance, those 1,000-year-old trees have no signs of withering at all. The withering is limited to the grass on the ground, and even a small flower is difficult to be affected. Rather than saying it is a change, in my opinion, it is more like a threat and clamor from something. It's like the whimpering and roaring of a puppy facing an irresistible threat. It's really a vivid metaphor, Gao Qiang laughed dumbly. However, after Juluo said this, the deterrence of the terrifying scene instantly returned to zero. A closer look, it's really like what Juluo said, only the grass is slightly withered, and the larger plants, even a small flower will not be affected by the withering. It really looks like someone is playing tricks. Zuzu smiled slightly on the side. Juluo has grown up. But if it was just a little bit of trickery, it wouldn't be enough for me, an old man, to come here in person. As he spoke, Zuzu looked at a place in the withered land. Hayukin understood and stretched out an arm to wave at the crossbow behind him. Instantly, a crossbow arrow with a flame flew out and hit the place where Zuzu's eyes were. The fire burned fiercely. Where the fire burned, the lawn was burned, revealing a large number of strange skeletons slowly moving forward in the soil under the lawn. Tisk, did you find it? In the soil layer, Snow's hollow skeleton opened and closed up and down, making a disdainful sound. In order to achieve a cooperative relationship with the human race, he was selected by the Great Cemetery and became a cadre to submit a letter of surrender to Gongxing Zhan. But in fact, he never took the lord named Gao Qiang seriously. How difficult is it to kill a human lord? As a cadre of the cemetery, he was not comparable to ordinary human lords. This time, in order to ensure that everything was foolproof, there were more than a dozen undead lords following him. Relying on the usual numerical advantage of the undead, Snow had a terrifying number of more than 10,000 soldiers. Originally, according to the principle of caution, Snow wanted to sneak into the wall by digging. I didn't expect that Gao Qiang's territory had developed quite well. He actually had the ability to throw fire remotely, and he also calculated his own plan and exposed himself in advance. Unfortunately, these were far from enough for Snow. Gao Qiang's behavior was just hastening his death. Since there was no way to disguise, then there was no need to disguise. Boom. After the lawn was burned clean, the soil layer exploded, and a skeleton monster emerged from the soil. At first glance, Snow had two strong and powerful thighs in his lower body, except for a skinless human head, as if he came from some kind of dinosaur creature. His arms were also completely changed, forming two strange limbs made of broken bones and shaped like long snakes. Looking at Gao Qiang, who was surrounded by people on the wall, a hoarse voice came out of Snow's head organ. "Are you Gao Qiang?" His talent was bone deprivation, and this skull belonging to a human was naturally the trophy obtained by Snow after he casually solved a human unlucky guy. Of course, he was just a bastard lord. Snow didn't care about this kind of thing, and Gongxing Jian didn't care either. Only Gao Qiang felt extremely uncomfortable looking at this messed up body. Seeing Gao Qiang silent, Snow showed a terrifying smile. "Silence can't change your fate. Someone wants you dead, so you will definitely die here today. Even if you built a wall to cover up your cowardice." Snow's voice fell. Countless skeletons' arms drilled out of the soil. Undead Lord Snow declared war on human Lord Gao Qiang, war reason, hatred of life. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 43. Tens of thousands of swaying skeletons formed a terrifying sea of bones. Some of the skeletons also held bone shields and spears. Although it looks a bit fragile, it is definitely enough in this stone age. Snow looked at Gao Qiang mockingly. "As the first lord to win the first kill of a natural disaster, I thought you had something worthy of praise." It turned out that he was just following the elves' example, hiding on the wood and shivering. Looking from a distance, from Snow's perspective, he could not see the more than 100 crossbow watchtowers in the wall of size. He could only see a poor lord standing on the wall, and the poor hundreds of archers under that lord. Snow doesn't think Gao Qiang built the wall on his own. According to his idea, Gao Qiang should have had some adventures. It is very likely that after entering the war game, he headed directly to the land of the Fourth War, thereby occupying such an unowned building in the wild. But humans are still humans after all. Snow continued to taunt. If it were the elves, there would be no need for such a tall wall. In other words, any giant tree would be a wall for the elves. Sasha really couldn't listen anymore. Snow's contempt for everyone gave Sasha goosebumps all over her body. He's obviously a scumbag who doesn't look good, so why can he be so confident? "What did you say?" Sasha didn't lower her voice at all, so Snow heard her clearly. Snow's jawbone kept trembling. He was obviously a human little girl, but he dared to anger himself so much at this stage. Could it be that she couldn't see the tens of thousands of undead warriors behind her? GGG. Snow suddenly laughed. "I thought you were a little pitiful at first, but now you have succeeded in irritating me. When I tear down your broken wall, I hope you can still speak to me in this tone." Listen to Snow's confident words. Sasha pouted, stood at the edge of the wall, stared at Snow and said in confusion, "I simply can't imagine what kind of hardships you have encountered on the road of evolution, and you actually need to throw away your poor brains. So you were just thinking with your brainless head. What a pathetic creature. You bastard." Faced with Sasha's aggression, Snow's condition was no better than Kyle's before. Ignoring the mutual insults between Sasha and Snow, Hayukin turned to look at Zuzu, and at the same time pointed at Snow in the distance. "Grandma Zuzu, is he the guy you counted?" Zuzu nodded, then shook his head. "It's him, and it's not him. To be more precise, it should be them." Gao Qiang was still wondering about Zuzu's riddle. "Suddenly I got a prompt from the war game. Your territory has noticed that the development of the undead technology tree is about to reach 60% of the upper limit of this game. The reason for total war against the undead has now been unlocked, be vigilant. Seeing these hints, Gao Qiang instantly understood what Zhu had calculated. But he really didn't expect that the undead tribe, which had been silent all this time, would actually be the force with the fastest technological development in this game. At the same time, Zhu looked at the undead army outside indifferently, and at the same time looked at the armor and shields and spears on their bodies. Fast, too fast. In just 1 month, they have developed to such a level. Zhu can hardly imagine what will happen in 2 months. Just make sure it's him. Hukin changed her lazy look from the past few days. He wrapped his wolf-skin coat tightly around his body and jumped down from the wall. Seeing someone actually jumping from that height, Snow stopped insulting each other with Shasha and turned his attention to Hukin. Are you scared enough to commit suicide? After the smoke and dust dispersed, Hukin opened his wolf fur coat, patted the dust on the fur, and then looked at Snow. Snow waved his hand to restrain the skeleton warriors who were about to move. He knew that they could hardly contain their disgust for life. Sasha is actually right. Most of the low-level undead are guys without brains and IQ. It was precisely because he was telling the truth that made Snow so angry. But now, the other party only has one person coming down, so let yourself taste the thrill of hunting life first. Boom. No need to say anything more, Snow used both legs to break away from the undead army at an extremely fast speed. He was very confident in himself and could return to the undead army after taking down Hukin's head. What he didn't know was that at least dozens of crossbow watchtowers were already aimed at him. As long as Hukin waves her hand behind her, Snow will be smashed into pieces by hundreds of crossbow arrows. Don't take action yet. Hukin shouted behind him. She wanted to see what kind of civilization this could be that could rapidly develop science and technology in just 1 month. On the opposite side, looking at Hukin, who was gradually becoming clearer, Snow pulled a smile from his skull. The human lord is planning to let this little girl compete with a little potato who is no more than 1.6 meters tall? Then he must accept the gift from the human lord. Snow's 2 snake-like arms suddenly stretched out and bit towards Hukin. Staring at Snow, who was approaching her quickly, Hukin stretched out her weak hands. She was just a helpless material officer. What kind of fighting power could she have? Crack. What? When Snow showed an expression of disbelief, everything was too late. Hukin grabbed one of Snow's arms and easily crushed the connected bones, letting the whole arm fall to the ground weakly. What did you do? Snow screamed subconsciously. So, that's all. Hukin looked at the bone residue in her hand, and seemed to have figured out how to distribute the materials when facing the undead next. In the 10,000 years of history after the fall of the Wall of Size, countless civilizations have been defeated here. Among them, there are countless arrogant ones, and there are countless strong ones. The current undead civilization seems unique, but it is far from being powerful. The fallen empire is like a stubborn stone blocking the road to civilization development. So many civilizations have been defeated, so why can the undead stand out? You are useless. Hukin returned to his earlier lazy look and laughed at Snow. What did you say? Before Snow could react, Hukin actually rushed towards him. It was too late to turn around. The last scene Snow saw was Hukin inserting his hand into his larynx and dismantling his entire head. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me She Did. Chapter 44. Click. The mandible of an undead lord fell to the ground. What happened at that moment? Snow rushed forward, one of Snow's arms was removed, Snow's head was removed, and Snow hit GG. Everything happened so fast that the 10 lords who came with Snow didn't even react. She killed Snow. One of the undead lords took off his own brain and wiped it hard before putting it back on his head. But the scene I saw was completely unchanged from just now. Who is Snow? He is a cotter of the necropolis and can hunt down small carnivorous dragons with his bare hands. Now he was easily killed by Hyukin. No, it is not accurate to say that he killed him. Hyukin just removed Snow's brain so that he could not communicate with his body. But everyone knows that unless Snow can use his talent to transfer his consciousness to other skulls now, falling into the hands of the enemy will be no different from death. Unless they can get Snow's head back. That's right. Get Snow's head back, an undead lord roared, commanding the skeleton warrior behind him to charge. Their undead are not as fragile as other races. As the lords of the undead, as long as their heads are still there is still a chance of resurrection. The other lords also reacted quickly. Snow is a cotter of the necropolis, and the necropolis has now almost unified the power of the undead. If they don't want to end miserably in this game, Snow must be saved. Otherwise, not a single soldier was lost, but only one general died. How should the other undead lords treat them when they return to the necropolis? Hyukin was holding Snow's skull and turned a deaf ear to the vibrations of tens of thousands of skeletons in the distance. It's so interesting, Hyukin couldn't help but admired as she hit Snow on the head. At this moment, Snow kept opening and closing his mouth in Hyukin's hand. Hyukin could imagine what vicious words he must be using to insult her. But because some of the sound-producing bones were missing, Snow's single skull was completely unable to make any sound. Seeing Hyukin playing with Snow's head like this, the leader of the undead clan shouted sharply from a distance, "Give Snow's head back." Oh! Hearing this, Hyukin put Snow's head on her waist and glanced at the sea of undead that was gradually advancing with swaying steps. The intimidation effect is good, but the combat effectiveness is not much worse than those cute wolves. But the distance is almost the same. The sea player waved back. The next moment, several undead clan lords saw a scene they would never forget. Countless arrows rained from behind the wall. The longbowmen's bows and arrows were okay, most of them slipped through the hollow bones of the skeletons, and only a few of them pierced the skulls, completely killing the skeleton warriors. What really frightened them was the giant crossbow arrows that were launched one after another as if they were free of charge. Often after 10 seconds of loading, thousands of giant crossbow arrows are fired. As long as a giant crossbow hits, it will definitely crush one or more skeleton warriors on the spot. Even if they are not crushed, they can be directly incapacitated in combat. What makes the undead lord most powerless is that these skeletons with limited mobility cannot perform such a difficult action of dodge. How many more of these giant crossbows do they have? Some lords couldn't help but yelled at the other lords. Any fool can see that this giant crossbow is expensive to make. From just now to now, in just a few minutes, thousands of these giant crossbow arrows have been fired in Gao Qiang's territory. Counting the arrows fired from those longbows, the ground was almost covered in hedgehogs. The lord of the undead couldn't help but curse in his heart. In the past, they, the undead clan, used their numbers to suppress others. Even if the quality was poor and the combat effectiveness was low, if they couldn't kill someone, they could still tire them to death. As a result, when they met Gao Qiang today, they could see what phobia of insufficient firepower was. Is this material reserve the amount it should have been in the Stone Age? In just a short moment, several undead clan lords had a lot of things in their minds. For example, Gao Qiang may be a lord who has participated in many war games and embarked on some material-related lord path. Even so, several undead clan lords couldn't help but want to curse. If he's so awesome, why don't he go to the mechanized age and throw missiles? Instead, go to the Stone Age and fry fish, right? But in the end, the number of undead tribe is superior. Finally, a skeleton warrior crossed the rain of arrows and approached Hyukin's side. Boom! In the empty eyes of several undead lords. The flood control wall's tens of meters of gates opened with a bang. Tyrannosaurus Rex walked out from behind the door, looking at a pile of skeleton warriors on the ground that were no bigger than their own feet. That look, let alone fear. It's just like looking at a bunch of toothpicks or teething sticks. Roar. The Tyrannosaurus Rex roared, and its foul-smelling mouth passed by Hookin. It picked up a few skeleton warriors and put them in its mouth to chew slowly. I have to say, although there is no meat, it tastes crunchy and crunchy, which is quite a good experience. While the undead were stunned, Hyukin took action again, stretched out her hands to grab the heads of two undead lords, and removed them from their bodies. Seeing that Hyukin had 3 heads hanging on her waist, the remaining undead lords stopped immediately. Something was wrong, 8 or 9 out of 10. How could this little potato be so scary? Doesn't she feel scared with 3 skulls hanging on her waist? The remaining undead lords looked a little wrong. If they dared to go up like this again, wouldn't their heads be removed as decorations? Retreat. An undead lord couldn't help asking. Okay, your order. The other undead lords were overjoyed, and while ordering their warriors to resist the attack of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, they drilled into the soil fiercely. As Snow's direct descendants, they all mastered the skills of digging the ground, which could be used for sneak attacks during the attack, and could also be used for escape if they failed, and they were always successful. In the blink of an eye, only the undead lord who had just proposed retreating was still standing there, a little dazed. No, I should have used a questioning tone just now, right? Indeed, I will testify for you. Click. In a split second, his head was also removed by Hyukin and pinned to his waist. After losing the command of all the undead lords, the remaining skeleton warriors completely became headless flies, running around the field. This is also the disadvantage of the undead. They are quite cheap in recruiting people and training warriors, but at the same time their IQ is not high. Once the command of the Lord is lost, the remaining people cannot act independently. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me. Chapter 45. Seeing that there were no more heads to disassemble, Hyukin stopped and stretched lazily. Call it a day. On the other side, Gao Qiang opened the chat window with Saha. Saha's message was still in front of him. The jackals are preparing to launch a full-scale attack on the undead. Are you interested in earning some contribution points? No new news came. It seems that Saha is quietly waiting for Gao Qiang's reply. Okay. Gao Qiang did not refuse this time. According to Gao Qiang's current number of warriors, it is still a bit troublesome to launch a punitive war against the undead. According to estimates, at this stage, the total number of jackals should have exceeded 1 million. If it were undead, it would be possible to increase tenfold. It's not that they can't win, but the huge number of undead in the undead is likely to drag Gao Qiang into the quagmire of a protracted war. Since Saha is willing to provide cannon fodder and vassal troops to help fight, Gao Qiang naturally has no reason to refuse. That's right, in Gao Qiang's eyes, he is the main force. In the near future, his feeling will certainly be confirmed. Far away in the front line area of the knolls. Looking at the reply from Gao Qiang, Saha showed a strange smile. Will the powerful reinforcements you said really come? A knoll lord beside Saha asked doubtfully. As the second lord to kill the scourge and the evil star of the knoll race. Saha almost only moved his mouth and gained great support from the knolls. But they believed that Saha might have some strength, but they didn't think that Saha could call for any strong reinforcements. No matter how strong they are, can they be as strong as the knoll army that is now integrated? According to Saha's strategy, they will launch a surprise attack when the undead tribe invests a lot of resources in the final strategy. This is almost a war that must be won, and no foreign aid is needed at all. Saha looked at the lord who questioned him, shook his head, and showed a weird expression. Believe me, you will be glad that I found this foreign aid. Opening the wargame interface, Saha glanced at the lord path he entered with his peripheral vision. Zone Hung. Will you launch a full-scale war against all the lords of the undead? Yes. Saha and Gao Qiang launched a full-scale war against the undead almost at the same time. But unlike Saha, Saha was equivalent to declaring war on the undead on behalf of the jackals as a whole. So in Saha's war interface, tens of thousands of lords fought against tens of thousands of lords. From Gao Qiang's perspective, there was only a lonely wall of size in his war interface. Has the war started? At the moment the war started, Zuzu looked into the distance. The strange thing is that although she was not a lord and did not know where the undead lords were born, she accurately found the location of the undead. If we are alerted, it will become a disaster hanging over the heads of other civilizations. Let me, an old woman, lead the team in this war. Hearing Zuzu's initiative, Gao Qiang suddenly recalled something he had not done since entering the game. In addition to the Lord personally leading the army, the war game can also recruit powerful generals to command the battle. Although there were no generals to recruit in the Stone Age, in some advanced eras in the future, a powerful general would be more than 10 times better than the Lord. And Zuzu's current intention is obviously to let Gao Qiang designate himself as the commander. Wait, let me go. Juluo suddenly said. Seeing Gao Qiang's hesitation, Juluo continued to add. There are still many civilizations left. Once we go to war with a civilization, other civilizations may get involved. Although we are not afraid of any existence, but Grandma Zuzu staying in the territory can perfectly prevent us from being attacked. This is a bit dependent on metaphysics. But after going through so much, Gao Qiang still recognized Juluo's control of the overall situation. However, Gao Qiang was a little confused, so I don't have to go with you this time. Lord. Juluo looked at Gao Qiang with a smile. Although I'm embarrassed to say it, you should stay in the territory, it's safer. Hearing this, Gao Qiang no longer hesitated. He was not a pedantic person. Since Juluo said that he would be in danger, why would he go against his own life? Besides, the Lord really shouldn't go to the front line every time. If it weren't the Stone Age, I'm afraid most lords would choose to let the generals lead the troops, and shrink in the defense of the territory. Opening the interface of the war game, Gao Qiang casually organized the knights, and then handed the main general to Juluo. Suddenly, Gao Qiang felt something was wrong. After a closer look, he found that Juluo had 12 golden entries after becoming the main general. Fallen Empire, the legacy of your ancestors makes you far more powerful than any other existence when you are the main general. The combat effectiveness of your troops increases by 50%. Use local resources, the troops commanded by this general can never be cut off from supplies. Overcome the enemy's initiative, ordinary strategies are likely to be seen through by this general, and ambushes are ineffective against this general. Advance and retreat in moderation, this general will not fall into a difficult battle, and this general cannot be stopped from moving. With Juluo becoming the main general, the Tyrannosaurus Knights gathered under the wall, and the overall momentum obviously became much more fierce. Gao Qiang slapped his face in embarrassment. Did he hinder his subordinates from performing well by leading the army in person? With these entries, the fallen empire alone is as rich as 5 generals of Suyukai. Wait, could it be that the others are also like this? Gao Qiang subconsciously transferred the main general to Shasha. Sure enough, a large number of golden entries flashed in Gao Qiang's eyes. Although Shasha's entries were not as good as Juluo's, there were still 9 of them. Fallen Empire. Perfect diplomat, when this general performs an insulting action, the opponent's reduced favorability doubles, and there is a high probability of falling into rage. Broad-minded, this general will not be angered by words and is immune to any negative status related to chaos. Indifferent, under the influence of this general, all directly affiliated troops will not fall into a state of fear. After switching the main general back to Juluo, Gao Qiang accepted the fact that he was the only one on the scene who was useless. If the Lord has no other doubts, I am ready to go. Zhuo walked towards the wall and turned back to remind Gao Qiang. Lord, remember to sleep well every day and eat on time. Wu. Seeing Zhuo really leave, Sasha seemed to suddenly realize something and looked at Zhuo's back with tears in her eyes. The chef sister is gone, who will cook for us? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 46. In the deep cemetery of the undead. As early as the moment when several undead lords had just fled, the news of Snow's failure was heard by many cotters. Dozens of cotters with strange looks gathered in the Supreme's meeting hall. Although the meeting hall in the Stone Age was quite simple, it was enough to prove that the undead technology was far ahead. You know, the meeting hall is further away from the Lord's Hall. Even among the gnolls, no lord has developed the building technology to this level. As for the human race, even the elders in the Upper Alliance are mostly scattered and independent, so Gong Xingjian naturally has no need to study the meeting hall. In silence, the undead supreme sitting in the main seat suddenly spoke slowly. Tell me about Snow's failure. A dozen cotters looked at the supreme's figure, which was more than 5 meters tall, with extremely tough bones. Compared with the leader, he was more like a living war machine. But the cotters who understood him knew that this came from the supreme's personal talent. And for this, he also lost a lot. Great power in the body, all the people you recruit will be integrated into yourself. It took thousands of skeletons to make the Supreme's body grow to 5 meters, which shows how low the conversion rate of this talent is. Even this talent is a passive skill. In other words, if he cannot lead other lords, this Supreme will remain alone forever. Fortunately, at least in this game, he succeeded. After the Supreme spoke, the meeting hall gradually became noisy. It's just a human. 10,000 is not enough, why not give me another 100,000 skeleton warriors? If we can't beat him, can't we tire him to death? That's right, you know Snow is just among us. The strongest one. The field was quiet in an instant. The cotter who just spoke found that everyone's eyes were looking at him. Other cotters looked at him with murderous eyes. It seemed that they were blaming him for talking about something that was not related to the topic. That. Suddenly a cotter raised his hand weakly. Why don't we surrender? Find a place to dig a deep pit of several dozen meters and bury them. How can they kill us? Bang. The Supreme smashed down with a punch, smashing the cotter who had just spoken into a flat lump. You are a soft bone. If you disturb the morale of the army again, I will tear your bones and feed them to pigs. Soon, the cotter's bones bounced back. This has something to do with his personal talent. Cartilage, your bones are quite soft, blunt damage is reduced by 80%, and bones recover slowly over time after deformation. Then according to the Supreme, what should we do? Of course. Just when the Supreme was about to speak, 2 wargame notifications came. One was a notification for all undead lords. The jackals have declared war on the undead, and the reason for the war is total war. The other was a notification for all servers. The technology level of the undead has reached 60% of the upper limit of this game first. In order to suppress the threat, the Fallen Empire declares war on all the lords of the undead clan. The reason for the war is, beware, you are about to enter a state of war. Beware of war, unique to the Fallen Empire. Once the Fallen Empire wins the war, all lords on the losing side will not be able to break through the 60% upper limit of the technology tree until the end of this game. Since the opponent is the Fallen Empire, in this war, your initial war weariness is 50%, the war weariness acquisition rate is increased by 100%, and morale is reduced by 20%. When the Supreme saw that the initial war weariness was 50%, he was already confused. The undead clan has no such thing as war weariness. What can they be afraid of when they don't even have emotions? But then he opened the interface of the war game, and the question mark on the Supreme's forehead increased again. Because in the war interface with the fallen empire, the war weariness was nakedly written, 50% 50%. Even due to the influence of the fallen empire, the war weariness of the undead clan facing the jackals has also increased to the same level. 0% 50%. That. The Supreme calmed down a bit and sat back to his original position. I suddenly feel that the proposal just now is interesting. On the other side, Saha, who had not yet set out, also saw the changes in the war weariness of both sides. The war weariness of the undead race jumped directly to 50%. I didn't expect that the cooperation with Gao Qiang would have benefits in just a short moment. The other Knoll lords naturally noticed this. Then they looked at Saha. The plan remains unchanged, let our people catch the undead race by surprise. As Saha gave the order, the Knoll lord, who had been ready, led a mighty army of warriors to sweep towards the birthplace of the undead race. The Knoll lord had the courage to accompany Saha to fight, naturally not because they trusted Saha so much. But the terrain of the undead race was different from theirs. The birthplace of the Knolls is surrounded by mountains on many sides, and there are natural barriers of mountains, so they only need to face the threat of the undead. The undead are mostly in the wilderness, so they must be vigilant against all three tribes at the same time. In other words, the Knolls can afford to lose, but the undead cannot lose this war. Besides, be vigilant against war? A jackal lord looked at the record of the server-wide notification. Once the undead lost this war, it would be the same as a complete failure. As the flames burst out at the junction of the two tribes, the first full-scale war in this war game broke out completely. Saha, who was sitting in the rear, showed a strange smile. The progress of the vertical and horizontal paths is increasing. Whether the jackals died or the undead died, it would increase Saha's progress in the vertical and horizontal paths. Just as he promised Gao Qiang. In this war game, the jackals, or Saha had no intention of letting the jackals win. On the one hand, Saha did not think that Gao Qiang did not have the strength to defeat him. On the other hand, after being surrounded and killed by Patrick, and the other jackal lords stood by and watched, Saha had already lost the concept of race. Now he only pursues personal victory. And personal victory is to survive this damn game. As wise as he is, he naturally knows who to please. Looking back at the road he came from, Saha's eyes seemed to see the endless mountains. The heavenly soldiers in Gao Qiang's hands suddenly appeared from that impossible place and saved him inadvertently. So, enjoy it, enjoy the great gift I offer you. Use the flesh and blood of the jackals to hold back the absolute main force of the undead. Therefore, the heavenly soldiers in Gao Qiang's hands can drive straight in another direction to slaughter the production units of the undead and annihilate the undead's territory. And, get the highest war contribution in this game. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 47. Byte. This week's rules have ended. The number of lost lords this week is 6,782, a surprising result. At 12 o'clock at night, Gao Qiang did not go to bed early. There is a new round of bonfire party under Stonehenge. Until now, the ancient nobles are still singing and dancing, enjoying each other. Sasha's joke didn't come true. Although Jologo has left the territory for the time being, there are many waiters in the territory. Even if Jologo is gone, there will be others to do Jologo's work. Therefore, it is impossible to starve everyone. What are you thinking, Lord? Shasha came to Gao Qiang's side and took a small bite of the barbecue. Gao Qiang glanced at Shasha, who was full of oil, then lay down on the lawn and looked at the stars in the sky. More than 6,000 people died last week. It is more than 4 times that of last week, Gao Qiang said silently. Because of the all-out war between the jackals and the undead, a large number of lords who tried to get through were tragically destroyed. The number of deaths last week even exceeded the number of wolves that surrounded us in the first week. Of course, these people are definitely not just jackals and undead. Humans and elves are definitely included in the number of more than 6,000 people. As the tension between the 4 tribes increases. In the absence of external war, the best way to train troops is those weak lords of the same race. Some lords even intended to use the corpses of lords of the same race to improve their own lordship. After all, the higher level of the path will also bring higher bonuses, increasing their survival rate in the upcoming battlefield meat grinder. Shasha tilted her head strangely, as if she didn't understand what Gao Qiang meant. But Shasha never thought about the things she didn't understand. Holding the barbecue and sitting next to Gao Qiang, Sasha continued to eat. Looking at Gao Qiang's outstretched hand, Shasha was a little confused. Hurry up and give me some points, Gao Qiang laughed and scolded. It was enough to sigh with emotion, but he was already hungry after this emotion. After snatching the barbecue from Shasha's hand, Gao Qiang continued to pay attention to the interface of the war game. Although the evil star rule has ended, the evil star buff it brought is still maintained. It seems that the final strategy does not have to be reached within a week. As long as the evil star does not die, it is possible to achieve the final strategy at any point in time. At the same time, the end of one rule also represents the arrival of another rule. This week's game rules have been unlocked. Week 4, Linjun Confrontation. Army War. Please actively or passively face a war within this week, regardless of race, victory, or defeat. Note, all those who have not faced the war will have war targets randomly selected by the war game, including but not limited to ancient ruins, dinosaur colonies, fallen empires. Gao Qiang looked at the notes on the war game in confusion. No, why does this involve him? If possible, it's so powerful that I really want to try it. What would happen if the penalty for approaching an army match was randomly assigned to Fallen Empire? Is he being forced to declare war on himself, or will another Fallen Empire appear in this war game? But it's a pity that Gao Qiang doesn't have this chance. Your goal, to confront the army, has been achieved. Judging from the prompts, Jologo should have arrived at the territory of the undead tribe. Like Gao Qiang, because the jackals and undead are in a state of all-out war, almost every lord has directly completed this week's rules. Humans and elves, on the other hand, fell into hesitation. It was to integrate the lords of their own clans and directly launch a full-scale war without preparation. It is better to give up all-out war and engage in civil war within the clan, sacrificing the weak lords to preserve their own vitality. It seems like a difficult decision. No, they always have a third option. Gao Qiang took a bite of the barbecue in his hand and thought about the flaws in the rules of the war game. It can be seen that this rule is intended to reduce the number of existing lords. Although Gao Qiang didn't know the dangers of other random items, he knew the horror of the Fallen Empire. If you don't participate in this rule, you may even directly enter a state of hostility with the Fallen Empire, which is no different from dying. But in fact, as long as the lords pair up, declare war and surrender directly after confirming the victory or defeat, a quick and lossless war can be achieved. The only drawback is the trust between the lords. The losing side must bear losses. But it is difficult for them to guarantee whether the victor will make excessive demands. Fortunately for Gao Qiang, because of the blessing of the Fallen Empire, he didn't need to worry about intrigues with other lords. Now, he just needs to sit here, eat barbecue, and wait for the war contribution to be credited. That's right, with Jologo officially entering the birthplace of the undead tribe. In a short period of time, Gao Qiang has received news of obtaining war contribution points several times. In the absence of Gao Qiang's personal chariot, the Tyrannosaurus Rex formation moved nearly twice as fast. Facing the territory of the undead, they swept across it all the way. The messages asking for help in the undead forum quickly attracted the attention of the necropolis. Although the battle with the jackals was intense on the front line, the Supreme Being could not just sit back and watch Jologo clear out the empty guarded territories in the rear. Fallen Empire. The Supreme silently recited the name. At the first moment, he did not associate this name with Gaoqiang. How many enemies are there? As the Supreme of the Great Cemetery spoke, accurate information was quickly passed to the Supreme. 20 cavalry. 20 cavalry, they look like the top combat power of mankind. But, only 20? The Supreme, who was originally nervous, showed a strange look on his face. He stood up and crossed the heavy lines, looking in the direction of the jackals. The number of jackals wearing simple armor must be counted in hundreds of thousands or millions. I thought how many troops the fallen empire sent. But when I heard it, there were only 20 cavalry. The Supreme's hanging heart finally settled down. Although the main force of the undead clan was in a stalemate with the jackals, the defense in the rear would not be unable to handle even 20 cavalry. Which Cotter is closest to the invaders? The Supreme asked subconsciously. But when he saw the name reported, his face darkened instantly. That name is not someone else. It is the boneless lord who advocated surrender in the meeting hall a few days ago. Although he was born timid, the development of his territory was unexpectedly good, which was far beyond the reach of other lords, otherwise he would not have become a Cotter of the Great Cemetery. Covering his forehead, the Supreme waved his hand helplessly. The garrison lords can at least gather 50,000 skeleton warriors. Tell that boneless lord that if 50,000 can't beat 20, I will use his bones to make soup when I come back. After thinking about it, the Supreme still felt that it was not appropriate. Find the Cotter who wanted 100,000 troops in the meeting hall before, and ask him to withdraw 100,000 troops from the front line to support. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 48. 50,000, 100,000. When the supreme order came to cartilage, he was being chased by the Tyrannosaurus Rex and running away. As the Cotters who stayed behind, they came straight to the rotary head after Jologo entered the territory of the undead. It's not hard to find Gristle. As a Cotter left behind in the necropolis, Kondotu is naturally the best among the best in the eyes of other undead lords. Jologo didn't need to say anything, the undead clan lords spontaneously led Jologo to Zutongtu. And the price is naturally the bones that can be seen everywhere on the ground. Skeleton warriors can do just fine beating gnoll warriors and so on. But you want this thing to fight a Tyrannosaurus Rex? If the weakling hadn't been so shameless, he really couldn't help but laugh. When it comes to how fragile the undead people were in the Stone Age, he is the best to say. Because he saw with his own eyes that the Tyrannosaurus Rex crushed a dozen skeleton warriors with one kick. Those stupid lords don't even think about it. Everyone has skeleton warriors under their command, but they can't break the defense of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, so they invite him to deal with it. Can you handle it yourself? It can be said that if it weren't for the blessing of Cartilage's personal talent, he would have died countless times. Come on, Lord Fitch. Hearing the cheering sound coming from his ears, the soft man couldn't help but stare. Those things just now weren't what made him the most angry. What made him the most angry was seeing himself being crushed by the Tyrannosaurus Rex again and again. The undead lords under him actually stood by and watched. Forget it if you don't help, you just keep cheering me up, for fear that you won't die quickly enough, right? Seeing the weaklings staring over, several undead lords shrugged their shoulders. Master Fitch, you really can't blame us. If we can't break the defense, there's nothing we can do. After saying that, before the Tyrannosaurus Rex noticed him, several undead lords slipped into the ground and disappeared. One soldier is a raging warrior, and a raging general is a den of raging warriors. The lord under the soft head has indeed obtained his true inheritance. Seeing his men running away, Kondro couldn't help but clenched his fists. Thinking back to the supreme order just now, I almost couldn't help but curse him back. Because what those undead lords said was right. The skeleton warriors at this stage cannot break through the Tyrannosaurus Rex's defense at all. The osteoporotic bone spears almost break at a touch when faced with the Tyrannosaurus Rex's thick skin. The Supreme actually told him to dispatch 50,000 skeleton warriors to destroy the invading cavalry. Didn't the Supreme Master's math teacher during his lifetime teach him that the multiplication of 50,000 zeros is still 0? Enough. The soft head suddenly turned around. He stretched out his finger and pointed fiercely at Julugo, who was obviously the leader. The sudden burst of momentum made Julugo shout with great interest to stop the advance of the cavalry regiment. Since entering the territory of the undead until now, Julugo has not encountered anything that can stop them. And the skeleton now is, after all, a cotter of the necropolis. Could it be that this guy who can stand up again every time he gets stepped on has some tricks up his sleeve that they don't know about? You chose me as your first target just because you want to pick the weaklings, right? Zwotu's tone gradually became gloomy, and an indescribable momentum emerged from his body. Then he said sternly, word by word, you have chosen the right person. I surrender. Boom. The Tyrannosaurus Rex stepped down with its big foot, crushing the cartilage head again. Only then did the knight on the back of the Tyrannosaurus Rex hear what the soft head was saying. Then he looked at Julugo with an innocent face. Well, you can't blame me. It's the first time I've seen someone surrender so hard. Julugo helplessly raised his forehead and shook his head. Just that one blow to Zongtu, not to mention other people, even Julugo almost couldn't hold back the desire to do it. I already said I surrender. After a few minutes, the cartilage bounced up from the ground again and expanded back to its original shape. Then he looked at the bones on his body distressedly. Although it is a weakling, it is only immune to 80% of blunt damage. He is not invincible. Once the Tyrannosaurus Rex gives him a few more blows, maybe he will never have to leave this war game again. Just when Zutongtu was secretly feeling distressed, he saw the delicate and beautiful legs of a human woman appearing in front of him. Put away the aversion to the breath of life in your heart. The weakling raised his head. Although it was hard to imagine, Julugo still saw a hint of ridicule on the cartilage skull head. This must be the Lord of the Fallen Empire. It's better to see once than to hear 100 times. Because of the need to unite with humans, Cartilage learned some polite ways from humans some time ago. No, won't you use it today? It's just that Julugo obviously didn't like the weak politeness, and at the same time he didn't play his cards according to the routine. She looked at the soft bones with a half smile, seeing is not as good as hearing 100 times. Tell me what my name is. Karma. The cartilage was silent for a moment. How could he know the name of the woman in front of him? On the contrary, this woman was a little too close to him. Looking at the woman who was already in front of him, Zwotu secretly calculated his chances of escaping after killing Julugo. Killing the Tyrannosaurus Rex is difficult, but killing Julugo is much easier. With the talent of cartilage, he may not be able to escape. Make up your mind. Soft Bones raised his head, and his tone softened instantly. Look at my head, I even forgot your name, I deserve to die. After that, Soft Bones slapped himself without hesitation. Why kill? How could he do such a dangerous thing? I deserve to die, I deserve to die. As long as Julugo didn't call for a stop, Soft Bones kept slapping himself. Enough. Julugo still spoke out to stop Soft Bones' behavior. Reaching out and grabbing Soft Bones' ribs, Julugo approached Soft Bones. Tell me, who among you can declare the failure of this war? You want to find the Supreme. Soft Bones instantly understood what Julugo meant. It is difficult for the undead to fail completely, because their war weariness is almost impossible to increase. Want the undead to declare failure. Either completely wipe out the undead from this game. Or, like Julugo is doing now, let the undead admit defeat. The only person who can do this now is the Supreme. After understanding this, Softbones said flatteringly, I don't like what you said. I was born to welcome the arrival of the fallen empire. And the Supreme you are looking for. Not only did he ask me to order 50,000 skeleton warriors to block your way, he also sent back a full 100,000 skeleton warriors from the front line with the jackals, saying that he wanted to completely destroy you. Softbones spit. That Supreme is really a piece of shit. The arrival of the fallen empire is our honor. It's fine if he doesn't welcome us with open shoes, but he actually dares to stop us. Enough, lead the way. Julugo interrupted Softbones' endless speech and glanced at him at the same time. Human idioms are well used. Don't use them next time. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishida Di. Chapter 49. Your war contribution increases by 1,000. Your war contribution increases by 1,000. Gao Qiang yawned vaguely. He went to bed too late at night, causing Gao Qiang to sleep soundly until the afternoon. However, as soon as I woke up, there was information that the two contributions had increased by 1,000. At the same time, hundreds of messages were followed, increasing more or less war contributions. Gao Qiang scratched his head and enjoyed the face wash brought by the waiter. So, who did Julugo stabbed in the den of the dead and gave him so many contribution points? The existence that can provide 1,000 full contribution points is obviously not an ordinary lord, at least not those guys who are just messing around. Now on the human race's rankings, Gao Qiang's war contribution has risen to nearly 50,000, which is enough to make Gongxing Zhan jealous to the point of madness. Without him, Gongxing's sword, which currently ranks second in the rankings, only has 5,112 points of contribution. The third place is even more pitiful, but its contribution of 82 points is less than a fraction of the two. It can be said that if Gongxing's sword had not contributed a miraculous item, it would definitely not be much better than the third place now. However, it was clear that he was the first to acquire the miraculous items, and it was he who proposed the establishment of the Shangji Alliance. Obviously his Gongxing sword has seized all the opportunities in this game, so why does Gao Qiang stand at the top of the list? Gao Qiang, who was missed by Gongxing Zhan, found Hayukin who was counting supplies after washing up. At this moment, there are several skulls on Hukin's table, all of them are lords from the undead tribe. You actually still keep them, Gao Qiang couldn't help but laugh. Collecting hobby. Hayukin smiled nonchalantly, then arranged a few skulls and placed them on a shelf nearby. By the way, Lord came to see me for something. Just curious. Gao Qiang looked at Hayukin who was in working mode. According to the supplies stored in the Fallen Empire, if it is only for the consumption of more than 10,000 people, squandering regardless of consumption is not a problem at all. Hayukin, the supplies officer, has no need to count supplies. She had always done this before. But after discussing it with Grandma Zuzu, Hukin got into working mode as she is now. Is something going to happen next? Facing Gao Qiang's inquiry, Hayukin nodded. My mother-in-law told me. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, and I'm not sure if it will happen. But the nobles are about to wake up. Gao Qiang looked at Hayukin's expression. What Hayukin said about the nobles waking up seemed to be a very scary thing for her. Because Gao Qiang even saw the seriousness on Hayukin's face. Like Hayukin, who had a premonition or something, there was also Julugo who was far away in the horizon. Holding the reins of the Tyrannosaurus Rex together with the knight, Jolodo couldn't help but look back in the direction of the wall of size. Lord Jolodo, the sneer voice of the soft head made Jolodo return to his expressionless state. It was precisely because of the treachery of the weaklings that Jolodo effortlessly rampaged through the birthplace of the undead, and even crushed to death a person who was also a cotter of the cemetery. It can be said that if there were no cartilage, even if the Tyrannosaurus Rex team could still run rampant here, they would not be able to find those cotters so accurately. "How are things going?" Jolodo glanced at Zotongtu. "Everything you asked has been done." The soft-headed man opened and closed his mouth and chuckled. "I have informed the lords who came to support us to meet at the place you ordered. The rest is just for you to check it out." Okay, Jolodo nodded. As for the 100,000 skeleton warriors mentioned by Zotongtu, Jolodo didn't take them seriously at all. Things that cannot break the defense will still not be able to break the defense no matter how much they come. That loser Fiki can clearly unite an army of 50,000 from the surrounding lords, but he still has to wait for me to gather before he dares to attack. Chester, who had just retreated from the battlefield with the jackals, couldn't help but curse. Facing an all-out war with gnolls, although dangerous, is also a good opportunity to gain war contribution points. After the war game is over, the Lord can gain a lot of benefits based on his war contribution. Whether it is to increase the personal qualities of the Lord, improve the attributes of the territory, or even obtain props that can be taken to other battlefields. As long as the war contribution is high enough, any wonderful or weird things may be randomly obtained. As a result, because of what he said in the council chamber, give me an army of 100,000 people. If you can't defeat the opponent, you will exhaust the opponent to death, which led to him being successfully targeted by the Supreme. Now facing the fallen empire's mere 20 cavalry attacks on the undead tribe's hinterland, the Supreme actually gave him the power to mobilize 100,000 skeleton warriors and asked him to lead some lords to return reinforcements. But this is different from Fitch's idea. Facing any fallen empire, Chester was quite confident. According to the forum battle report and the description of the weakling Fitch, the enemy only had 20 riders. Never mind how strong these 20 riders are. 100,000 to 20, 5,000:1 head count ratio, the advantage is mine. Even if he couldn't defeat him, how could his 100,000 strong army exhaust the opponent to death? Speaking of which, the meeting place chosen by Fitch, the Soft Bone, is quite good. Chester was a little surprised when he saw the meeting place that Fitch pointed out to him in the chat box. This place is an open plain, and it is absolutely impossible to carry out any ambush. It is very suitable for large troops to station. Although Chester doesn't care about ambush and the like, the fact that he can choose this place just proves that Fitch has a good vision. That Soft Bone is quite something, Chester admitted Fitch for once. If it were normal times, among the cotters in the entire cemetery, Fitch would definitely be one of the cotters he despised the most. But he is not even 1/10,000th as good as you, Lord Chester. The undead lord on the side flattered. Compared with Fitch, Chester's reputation in the cemetery is even worse. Almost every undead lord around Chester understands that he is fond of boasting. He can praise others, but he will never allow others to praise the existence other than himself, except the Supreme. The reason why he can become a cotter of the Great Cemetery is because his territory type is quite excellent. Endless, when there are corpses in your territory, every time you lose an undead unit, you will revive an undead unit in your territory. This is also why Chester likes to talk about numbers. Because there is no loss, with Chester's continuous recruitment, his territory has already mastered a number of warriors far exceeding that of other undead lords. So he is eager to prove himself that he can defeat all stubborn enemies with numbers. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 50. The march of several days passed in a flash, and Chester came to the plain where he had agreed with Fitch to meet. Because it was located in the birthplace of the undead. This plane has fallen into a complete silence, and even a few broken bones can be seen randomly inserted on the ground. That, Lord Chester. An undead lord looked at the empty plane in front of him, and seemed to have a bad premonition. Fitch's spineless man is not here, he reminded implicitly. According to the impression of many undead lords on Fitch's spineless man, he wanted to bury himself in the protection circle of others. Now this plane is empty and visible, and it seems wrong no matter how you look at it. Chester hesitated. What the undead lord said just now is right. According to Fitch's temper of fighting 20 cavalrymen to join his 100,000 troops. When he controls 50,000 skeleton warriors, he must protect himself properly in 3 circles inside and outside. Even if other undead lords were not convinced by Fitch, they would not even give the supreme face. And now, the grassland seems too peaceful. But if Fitch, the spineless one, dared to plot against him, Chester would not believe it at all. If that were the case, the Supreme would not have to do it himself, he would tear Fitch's bones apart and make soup today. Opening the friend interface of the war game, Chester directly questioned Fitch without any hesitation. Where are you and your people? Underground, Fitch replied faintly. Seeing these 2 words, Chester was speechless for a moment. Well, his narrow-minded thinking still overestimated Fitch's backbone. Because of the drilling technology tree, only 2 cotters in the cemetery have studied it. One of them is Snow, who is suspected to have died in battle, and the other is naturally the spineless Fitch. But the difference between the 2 is: Snow pointed out that drilling is to better attack other territories. And the spineless Fitch is simply to escape. Because of the experience of being buried deep, the drilling technology of low-level undead was absolutely unique in the Stone Age. After drilling into the ground, few lords could catch them. Now, with just 2 words from Fitch, the doubts that Chester had in his heart have disappeared. Of course, what gave him more confidence were the 100,000 skeleton warriors following behind him. Those skeleton warriors gathered together, just like the tide, and any living creature would fall under this frenzy that belonged to the undead. Let's go and meet that soft bone. Stepping into the center of the plain without panic, Chester found the location that Fitch sent him. A boulder that was specially moved here as a mark. After Chester stood firm in front of the boulder, Fitch also drilled out of the mud. You are worthy of being a soft bone. Looking at Fitch's dirty skeleton, Chester mocked mercilessly. As far as he knew, the fallen empire that invaded the rear of the undead clan had only 20 cavalrymen in total. Just 20 cavalrymen could scare Fitch, who had 50,000 skeleton warriors, into hiding. I think we should stop calling you a coward in the future. You're so good at digging in the ground, you can just be your groundhog. The undead lords who followed Chester laughed. They were not afraid of Fitch's revenge. Even among the cotters of the great cemetery, Fitch was a well-known coward. It was strange to say that among the cotters of the great cemetery, there were those who advocated war, those who advocated defense, and even those who advocated surrender. But Fitch was the only one who advocated digging a hole to bury himself. With such courage, if he just laughed at him, he might not even have the courage to retaliate. Fitch had a gloomy face, and because he had no face, it was impossible to tell what his expression was at the moment. He just tried to smile as much as possible and asked Chester, Master Chester, the lords you brought from the main battlefield should all be here, right? Chester stopped laughing and looked at Fitch in surprise. In the cemetery, he and Fitch were both cotters, but now Fitch lowered himself to call him master. He is indeed a soft-boned Fitch. So what if they are all here, Chester said. Okay, it's good to be all here. Fitch's lower jaw opened, as if he was laughing silently. The next moment, Fitch reached out and grabbed Chester's skeleton. Fitch, what are you going to do? Master, hurry up. Chester and Fitch's voices rang out at the same time. Before Chester thought about who Fitch was calling, he saw a terrifying figure rushing out of the boulder and stepped on him. Your war contribution increased by 1,000. Your war contribution increased by 120. A large amount of war contribution filled the Zhaoqiang game panel. At the same time, the gnolls also clearly saw that among the thousands of lords on the side of the undead that they were attacking, dozens of lords' territory logos disappeared instantly. Surrendered? No, they were eliminated. What happened? Some gnoll lords have not figured out the situation yet. It seems that Chester was eliminated. Because Chester was responsible for the frontal combat before, many gnoll lords have recognized his terrifying territory characteristics. The cotters of the Great Cemetery are not in vain. As long as he instructs other lords to bring corpses for feeding, Chester will have an endless supply of skeleton warriors. Although there is an upper limit on the number, it also saves time and resources for re-recruitment. Therefore, even if he brought 100,000 skeleton warriors back to the hinterland under the order of the Supreme, Chester never took his own troops on the front line. Instead, he chose to keep them to continue to earn war contributions. If the jackals want to advance the front line, killing Chester or destroying Chester's territory is a must. And this enemy that gives them a headache. In an instant, dead. The next moment, in the front line that blocked the jackals, some skeleton warriors decayed instantly, turned into a wisp of dust and were blown away by the wind. Those skeletons that were resurrected because of the endless characteristics did not stay in place when the territory left, but dissipated with the territory. A lot of cheers broke out in the jackal line. Although the gnoll lords didn't know who killed Chester, without Chester's territory characteristics, the pressure faced by the gnolls during the attack was greatly reduced. At least, they didn't have to face those beings who could resurrect infinitely. Heh, cotters. Jologo chuckled. Unlike Fitch, a special soft bone. Chester, the cotter of the cemetery, and the dozens of undead lords led by his men. When they were stepped on by the Tyrannosaurus Rex, it was no different from stepping on ordinary skeleton warriors. They all turned into broken bones, deader than dead.